They pushed me into the pool while everyone was watching. I was standing at the edge, holding a plate, when I felt hands at my back. No warning. No slip. Just a shove. The water swallowed me whole, cold and heavy, and for a few seconds I truly believed this was how my life would end, in front of my own family, to the sound of laughter. I can't swim. My son knew that. I came up choking, arms flailing, hearing music, clinking glasses, someone laughing and saying, "Relax, it's just a joke." I saw my son's face then. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't scared. He was smiling. When they finally pulled me out, wet and shaking, no one apologized. Someone handed me a towel like you would to a child who'd made a mess. That was when it hit me, this wasn't an accident. This was permission. I stood there dripping, humiliated, invisible, thinking only one thing. How could they do this to me? If you're listening because you've ever been quiet, ignored, or betrayed by the people who should have protected you, stay with me. This story may sound familiar. My name is Mary Collins. I am 64 years old, and for most of my life I have been the steady one. The one who woke up early, paid the bills on time, kept receipts folded in neat stacks, and remembered birthdays without needing reminders. I did not grow up expecting help, and I did not raise my child to believe the world would bend for him. When my husband died, everything fell quiet in a way I was not prepared for. Not dramatic. Just empty. The house seemed larger. The nights stretched. I learned how to fix leaking taps, negotiate with banks, and sit through long silences without reaching for a phone. I learned because I had to. There was a child to raise and a future to hold together. My son, Evan, grew up in that house. He knew its rhythms, the creak in the hallway floor, the way I liked my coffee, the fact that I locked the door twice every night. I worked full-time and still made dinners. I saved when I could. I paid off the mortgage years earlier than planned. When something broke, people called me. When someone needed money just for a little while, they called me too. That was the role I slid into without realizing it had a cost. When Evan married Brooke, I told myself it was good to step back. That a mother should not hover. Brooke was polite at first. Always smiling. Always thanking me a little too loudly. She spoke to me slowly, as if volume could replace respect. I noticed it, but I ignored it. I had learned, over a lifetime, that keeping the peace often meant swallowing small discomforts. They began making decisions without me. Minor ones at first. Renovations I was told about after the fact. Appointments scheduled in my name that I had not agreed to. Papers placed in front of me with pens already uncapped, conversations framed as favors they were doing for me. "You've done enough," Evan would say. "Let us handle things now." And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that letting go was a sign of wisdom, not surrender. So I stayed quiet. I smiled when I felt uneasy. I told myself this was what families did, that roles changed, that age softened authority. But something else was happening. I could feel it in the way my words were brushed aside, in how quickly discussions ended when I entered the room. I was still there, still useful, still needed, just no longer listened to. I did not know it yet, but the ground beneath me was already shifting. The first time something felt truly wrong was a year before the pool party, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon that should have meant nothing. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my old blue mug, the one with the chipped handle, sorting through mail the way I always had. Bills on the left. Letters on the right. Nothing urgent. Nothing dramatic. Brooke sat across from me, her phone face down, her smile fixed and careful. She said, "Managing finances must be hard for you now. It's good you have us." Her voice was soft, almost kind, but the sentence landed heavy. I remember the way she tilted her head, as if she were studying me, waiting to see if I would protest. Evan stood by the counter, scrolling, not looking at either of us. I didn't answer. Not because I agreed, but because I felt something shift and didn't yet have words for it. I had balanced accounts since I was 20. I had navigated mortgages, hospital bills, funeral costs, and years where every dollar mattered. No one had ever suggested I was confused before. Brooke reached for a stack of envelopes and slid them closer to herself. "We can take care of these," she said, already opening one. "Less stress for you." I watched her fingers move, neat and confident, and I told myself it was nothing. Families help each other. That was the story I clung to. Still, I noticed her eyes. They weren't warm. They were focused. Measuring. Like someone checking a list. After that day, small things changed. Statements stopped arriving in the mail and began appearing as summaries I hadn't requested. Passwords were updated for security reasons and not always shared back with me. When I asked questions, Brooke would smile and say, "We already handled that," as if the matter were closed. Evan echoed her tone without realizing it. "You don't need to worry about that anymore, Mom." Each time he said it, something tightened in my chest. Not fear yet. More like disappointment. I had not asked to be relieved of my life. I had not handed it over. But piece by piece, decisions were being made without me, and my silence was being mistaken for permission. That was the first crack. Small. Easy to step over. But once it appeared, I could never unsee it. The changes did not arrive all at once. They slipped in quietly, almost politely, the way dust settles when no one is watching. I would notice something was missing only after I went looking for it. A folder from my desk. A document I remembered placing carefully at the back of a drawer. When I asked, Brooke would answer quickly, smoothly. "We moved that somewhere safer." Safer, apparently, meant away from me. I stopped being included in conversations that directly concerned my life. Appointments were discussed after they had already happened. Decisions were presented as finished facts. When I tried to speak, Evan would interrupt without realizing he was doing it, his voice louder, firmer, as if repetition could turn assumption into truth. "You don't need to stress about this," he would say. "We've got it covered." The house I still lived in began to feel unfamiliar. Doors were closed more often. Laptops snapped shut when I entered a room. The kitchen table, once my place of order, was cluttered with their papers, their plans, their timelines. My things were pushed to the edges. Even my medication went missing one morning. I searched the cabinet where it had always been. Then the bathroom. Then my bedside table. Brooke found it later that afternoon in a different drawer. "Oh, I must have moved it by accident," she said lightly. "You really should keep everything in one place." Her apology sounded practiced. Evan didn't look up from his phone. I began choosing my words carefully, measuring every sentence before I spoke. Not because I was confused, but because I was being watched. Corrected. Interpreted. Silence became easier than explanation. Silence, I learned, made me less visible. At night, I would sit on the edge of the bed and listen to the house breathe. The hum of the refrigerator. The tick of the hallway clock. The familiar sounds anchored me, reminded me that I still existed, even if no one asked my opinion anymore. I was still there. Still paying attention. Still capable. But I was no longer in control of my own space, my own time, my own voice. The realization did not arrive with anger. It arrived with a quiet hurt that settled deep and stayed. Something was being taken from me, slowly enough that no one thought to call it theft. The pool party should have been nothing more than an awkward afternoon I tried to forget. Instead, it became the moment everything finally showed itself, plain and undeniable. After I changed into dry clothes, I went upstairs, not to rest, but to steady my hands. My skin still smelled of chlorine. My hair clung damp to my neck. In our bedroom, the air was cooler, quieter, and for a minute I could almost pretend I was alone in my own house again. Then I noticed the filing cabinet drawer wasn't fully closed. It was a small thing, the kind of detail I used to overlook when I trusted people. But that day my attention felt sharpened, like pain does that. I pulled the drawer open. Inside, folders were stacked out of order, corners bent, a rubber band stretched too tight. Someone had been in here recently. Someone had been searching. I didn't panic. Not yet. I simply began to look. Near the back was a file I didn't recognize, thick, clean, and new, with a label printed in block letters, loan documents. My name was typed across the top page. Mary Collins. Address. Date of birth. Social security number. All correct, all mine. The amount made my stomach drop. I turned the pages slowly, reading every line as if my eyes might be lying to me. A home equity loan, taken against the house I had paid off. A disbursement schedule. A beneficiary address listed not as mine, but there's Evan and Brooks. And then, at the bottom, the signature. It looked like mine. The slant. The loop of the Y. The final stroke under the last letter. But I knew my own hand the way I knew my own breath. That signature had been copied, not written. Traced with confidence by someone who believed they would never be challenged. I sat down on the edge of the bed, papers trembling in my lap, and listened to the muffled party sounds drifting through the window, laughter, a burst of music, the clink of glass. My throat tightened, but no tears came. Tears felt too soft for what this was. Downstairs, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Voices. Their voices. I stood and moved closer to the door, careful and quiet, the way you become when you realize your own home is no longer safe. The door was ajar just enough. Brooke said, low and brisk, "We can't keep waiting. The bank needs the updated forms." Evan replied, irritated, "She's stubborn. She asks too many questions now." There was a pause, then Brooke's voice again, calm as a knife. "Once she's officially declared incompetent, this all gets easier." For a moment, the hallway seemed to tilt. My pulse thudded in my ears. I pressed my palm to the wall to keep myself steady, feeling the paint's faint grit under my skin. They were not just taking money. They were taking the right to exist as myself. And suddenly the shove into the pool wasn't a joke anymore. It was practice. It was a test. A way to see how quickly I could be made helpless while everyone watched and laughed. I carried the file back to the bed and laid it beside my husband's framed photo on the nightstand. His eyes, frozen in that small square of glass, met mine as if he could still see the truth. I whispered, barely moving my lips, "So this is what you've been doing." Then I picked up my phone, not to call anyone yet, but to start saving every piece of evidence before they could take it from me too. I photographed the pages with the flash off, screen dimmed, the way you do when you don't want to be noticed. My hand steadied as I worked. I told myself, facts first, feelings later. In the back of the file I found a medical release form, already filled out. It allowed authorized parties to speak to my doctor. Brooke's name was typed neatly on the first line. Evans on the second. My name appeared only where my consent should have been, in that same copied signature. A laugh rose from downstairs. "Evans. Easy. Unbothered." Brooke answered him in a low voice I couldn't fully catch, and then I heard one clear sentence, "Just keep her calm." Keep her calm. As if I were the problem to manage. I folded 2 key pages along their existing creases and slipped them into a plain envelope from my desk drawer. I returned the rest exactly as I found it, bent corners, crooked stack, stretched rubber band, then wiped the glossy cover with my sleeve. From the mirror, I looked pale, hair still damp, eyes bright with something that was not panic anymore. It was a cold, contained kind of clarity. Brooke called up the stairs, sweet as syrup. "Mary? Are you okay, honey?" I kept my voice level. "I'm fine." The lie tasted like metal, but it bought me time. The envelope sat against my hip like a small weight, a reminder that they weren't just after money or property. They were after my voice. And I was done letting them practice. I stood there listening to the party below, the clink of ice in glasses, the casual laughter, and I promised myself one quiet thing: the next move would be mine. Not theirs. Ever. That night, I did not cry. I did not throw things, or call anyone in a shaking voice. I did not give them the satisfaction of knowing they had cracked me open. I waited until the last guest left and the house settled into its nighttime sounds, the dishwasher sighing, the refrigerator humming, the hallway clock tapping out its steady seconds. Evan and Brooke went to bed like people with nothing on their conscience. I listened to their footsteps fade, then I locked my bedroom door with a calm I did not feel, and I turned on the little lamp beside my husband's photo. The light fell in a warm circle over the frame. His smile was the same as always, gentle and tired, as if he had spent his life carrying more than anyone realized. I sat on the edge of the bed and placed the envelope on my lap. Paper should not feel heavy, but that envelope did. It felt like a verdict. I laid the photographed pages on the quilt and studied them again, one by one, slow as prayer. The loan. The copied signature. The medical release. Their names typed in as authorized parties. And the sentence I had overheard, declared incompetent, looped in my mind like a cruel refrain. Incompetent. A word that could erase me with a pen stroke. I thought of all the times I had stayed quiet to keep peace. All the times I had let Brooke answer for me in public, smiling as if she were being helpful. All the times Evan had said, "Mom, don't worry," while his eyes slid past mine, already moving on to his own life. I realized, with a clarity that almost made me dizzy, that my silence had been used like a blank check. They were not waiting for me to fail. They were building a story in which I had already failed. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was still slightly damp at the ends. A faint bruise was forming on my upper arm where someone had gripped me as I went into the pool. My eyes looked sharper than they had that morning. Older, yes. But not confused. Not lost. I ran cold water over my hands and breathed until my heartbeat slowed. Then I made a small list on a notepad, what I knew for sure, what I needed to prove, and what I must protect. Facts. Dates. Names. Accounts. Documents. Doctors. Witnesses. I wrote neatly, the way I always had, because neat writing steadied my thoughts. And in the quiet between the pen strokes, something settled inside me. If I did nothing, I would not just lose money. I would lose my name, my home, my choices. I would become a person spoken about, managed, moved around like furniture. I would disappear while still breathing. I sat back down beside my husband's photo and let the truth land fully, without flinching. They had decided I was in the way. I touched the glass of the frame with 2 fingers, as if I could borrow a little strength through it. "I'm still here," I whispered. "And I'm paying attention." For the first time in months, maybe longer, I did not feel afraid of conflict. I felt afraid of surrender. I placed the envelope in my handbag, zipped it closed, and set the bag by the door. Then I turned off the lamp and lay down without closing my eyes, listening to the house as if it belonged to strangers. In the dark, I made myself one promise that felt like a turning key. If I didn't stop this now, I would disappear. I thought about the pool again, the instant my feet left the ground, the brief weightlessness, then the slap of water and the way my mouth filled before my lungs could. I remembered how quickly people decided it was funny. How quickly a crowd can turn a human being into entertainment, and how my own son had chosen the side of the crowd. It wasn't only cruel. It was instructive. It told everyone there that I could be handled. I replayed faces in my mind. Brooke's bright smile. The neighbor who looked away. The cousin who chuckled and sipped her drink. No one asked if I was all right until it was safe to ask. No one spoke up while it was happening. That, too, was information. On the nightstand sat a small lavender candle I used to light when my husband was alive. I twisted the lid off and held it under my nose. Lavender and wax. Ordinary. Familiar. I did not light it. I did not want comfort yet. I wanted wakefulness. I opened my phone and checked the time, 12:17 a.m., then 12:18. I pulled up my bank app and stared at the list of accounts. Some numbers I recognized by heart. Some had been renamed, the labels changed to vague titles. I did not tap anything that might alert them. I only observed. I took screenshots and saved them to a hidden folder, then emailed copies to an address only I knew. The small, careful work steadied my hands. When I set the phone down, I could hear the faint rush of the pool filter outside. The truth was plain, this had been planned. I was not dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with a strategy. And once I named it, I stopped shaking. I did not need to explode. I needed to move. By morning, my fear had hardened into something useful. I made coffee, the same way I always did, 2 scoops, a slow stir, because routine kept my hands steady. Evan and Brooke ate breakfast downstairs, talking about errands as if nothing had happened. I listened to their voices float up the stairwell, calm and ordinary, and I understood that my panic was the only thing they were counting on. When Brooke left her phone on the counter and stepped outside to take a call, I did not touch it. I did not need their devices. I needed my own paper trail, my own gates. In the back of my closet, behind winter coats, I kept a small metal tin of things I never threw away, my husband's watch, old deed copies, and an envelope with a number written in his neat handwriting. I had once asked him who it was. He only said, if anything ever feels off, call her. Promise me. I had laughed then, like people do when they think they have time. Now I dialed. A woman answered on the second ring. Sandra Hale. My throat tightened, but my voice came out level. My name is Mary Collins. Your number was left to me by my husband. I believe my family is trying to take control of my finances and declare me incompetent. There was no gasp, no dramatics, just a small pause, and then a tone that said she had heard this before. Mary, are you safe right now? Yes, I said. But I need to move quickly. Then we'll be methodical, she replied. No threats. No scenes. Evidence and boundaries. Can you meet today? By 10 o'clock I was sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, the air conditioner humming, my handbag in my lap like a shield. I emailed her the photos of the loan documents, the medical release, the screenshots from my bank app. I wrote dates and times beneath each file name. I kept my language factual. No pleading. No anger. Just proof. Sandra called back within minutes. First we stop the bleeding, she said. Do you have access to your accounts? I do, I answered, but I don't know what alerts it will trigger. Good. We'll assume they're watching. Here's what you'll do. Open a new account at a different bank, today. Transfer a safe amount, not everything. Then we'll place holds and change permissions through a formal request. I drove to a bank across town where no one knew Evan or Brooke. I wore sunglasses and my plain gray scarf, the one my husband used to compliment because it made me look unbothered. The teller was young, patient, and when she asked if anyone else should have access, I said clearly, no. Only me. Saying it out loud felt like stepping back onto solid ground. From there I went straight to my doctor's office. Not for an appointment, for a record. I requested copies of my recent evaluations, asked for a brief cognitive screening, and had the nurse note in my file that I was acting of my own free will. I smiled politely the whole time. Inside, I was building a wall one brick at a time. At home, I started documenting everything. I photographed drawers that had been disturbed, files that were out of order, and the labels Brooke had changed on folders. I printed the loan documents at the library so the paper had a public timestamp. I wrote a timeline in a notebook, Brooke's comment about managing finances, the missing statements, the moved medication, the pool incident, the overheard sentence. That evening, while Evan and Brooke watched television, I sat in my room with the lamp beside my husband's photo and made the hardest call of my life. I phoned my bank's fraud department. I reported the loan as unauthorized. I requested an immediate freeze on transfers above a set amount and asked for a new login, new security questions, and a note that no third party was to be added without me appearing in person. My voice did not shake. My hand did not tremble. I spoke the way I used to speak when contractors tried to overcharge me, calm, precise, unwilling to be rushed. When I hung up, the house felt different. Not safer yet. But changed. I looked at my husband's photo and whispered, "I'm moving now." And for the first time since the shove into the pool, I felt something return to me, my own authority. Before sleep, Sandra texted a short checklist, and I followed it without drama. I placed a credit freeze to block new accounts, then pulled my credit reports to see what else might be hiding. I booked an appointment with an estate attorney for the next morning, quiet protection, not revenge. I moved my passport, birth certificate, and my husband's death certificate into a safe deposit box, along with the tin from my closet. Small papers, big power. Down the hall, Evan laughed at something on the screen. Brooke's laugh joined his, bright and effortless. I held my keys in my palm until the metal warmed. Their comfort no longer confused me. It informed me. Tomorrow, their story would meet my facts, fast. I turned off the lamp and lay back, not with peace, but with a plan. The first consequence arrived as silence. Not the peaceful kind I'd been learning to like, but the startled, scrambling silence that follows when a plan stops working. Evan's laughter faded quickly over the next day. Brooke's voice, usually bright and certain, became clipped, full of little urgent whispers behind closed doors. On Wednesday morning I sat at the kitchen table with my blue mug and watched Brooke refresh her banking app again and again, her thumb moving like a metronome. She tried to keep her face smooth, but I saw the small flare of panic around her eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked, gently, as if I didn't know. She looked up too fast. "Nothing. Just technical issues." Evan walked in, phone pressed to his ear, and I caught the words declined and frozen before he noticed me. He ended the call and stared at Brooke the way a man stares at a door that used to open. That afternoon a courier arrived for Evan with an overnight envelope. He tore it open in the foyer, standing under the family photos as if he needed the ghosts of our past to steady him. His shoulders lifted, then fell. "What is it?" Brooke asked, already moving toward him. He didn't answer. He handed her the letter. From where I sat, I could see the bank's logo at the top and the bold line that mattered, account restrictions in place. Brooke's mouth tightened. "This can't be right." "It is," I said, quietly. They both turned to me. Evan's face was pale, the skin around his mouth drawn in a way I had never seen. "Mom," he started, forcing a laugh that wouldn't land, "did you do something?" I set my mug down. The ceramic made a small, clean sound on the wood. "I reported fraud," I replied. "And I asked for protections on my accounts." Brooke's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Fraud?" she repeated, as if the word were an insult. "Yes," I said. "The loan taken in my name. The medical release. The forged signature." For a second they were very still. Then Brooke's voice rose, sharp. "You're confused. You must be misreading." "I'm not," I said, and my tone did not change. "Sandra Hale has the documents. So does the bank. And my doctor." Evan's hands curled into fists at his sides. "Why would you do this to us?" The question would have made me laugh if it hadn't hurt. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I stopped you from doing it to me." That evening I heard them arguing in their bedroom, the words muffled but the panic unmistakable. I recognized snippets: payments, investor, we can't access, they'll pull out. Their business, the one Evan kept calling a startup and Brooke called our future, had been fed by my money like a fire fed by dry wood. When the flow stopped, the flames went out fast. By Friday, the consequences were no longer private. Evan's phone rang constantly. He paced the living room, stepping around my furniture as if the house itself had betrayed him. Brooke made a series of calls that ended in tight, polite apologies and the kind of silence that follows rejection. A week later, a formal notice arrived. An investigation had been opened into the loan and the attempted authorizations. The letter was addressed to me, not them. That detail mattered more than I expected. It was proof, on paper, that I was still the owner of my own life. Evan confronted me in the hallway that night, his voice low and furious. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I met his eyes. "Yes," I said. "I protected myself." Brooke stood behind him, arms crossed, but her confidence was gone. She looked smaller somehow, like a person who had been caught in bright light. For the first time since the pool, Evan wasn't laughing. He wasn't performing for anyone. He was simply facing a reality he hadn't planned for. I could say no, and the world would listen. And that, more than the frozen accounts, was what frightened them most. On Saturday, Brooke tried to keep up appearances with a little brunch she'd promised the neighbors, fruit arranged like flowers, a lemon candle burning in daylight. But her card was declined when she called in the catering order on speakerphone. She laughed too loudly, cheeks flushing, and said it must be the bank system. Evan offered to run to the ATM and came back 10 minutes later empty-handed, jaw tight, eyes darting. 2 days later their weekend trip collapsed. I watched them load suitcases, then unload them 20 minutes later, movements sharp and embarrassed. Brooke's airline app had rejected the payment on file. Evan kicked the tire once, then glanced up and froze when he realized I was at the window. That night Brooke came to my door with her voice softened. "Mary, let's undo this before it gets messy." "It's already messy," I told her. "I'm just cleaning it up." By week's end, a formal notice confirmed an investigation into the loan. Evan's startup missed payments, and their confident calls became tight arguments behind their door at night. I didn't announce my leaving. I just began, quietly, the way I had learned to survive. While Evan and Brooke were busy putting out the fires they'd lit, I packed one drawer at a time. I chose what was mine: photo albums, my husband's flannel shirt that still smelled faintly of cedar, the blue mug with the chipped handle. I left behind anything that felt contaminated by their version of my story. The attorney helped me file the changes that mattered. New powers of attorney. New beneficiaries. Clear instructions that required my in-person consent for anything financial or medical. It wasn't dramatic. It was paperwork. And the more I signed with my own steady hand, the more I felt myself returning. 2 weeks after the pool party, I moved into a small house near the lake, 20 minutes from town. It had pale walls, a modest porch, and a view of water that changed color by the hour. The first night I slept there, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. I could hear crickets. I could hear my own breath. No doors closing sharply. No voices lowering when I entered a room. My grandson Noah found me first. He was 12, all elbows and honesty, standing on my porch with his backpack half unzipped. He didn't ask about the investigation or the loan. He didn't ask me to soften it for him. He just said, "Grandma, I didn't like what they did to you." I held the screen door open and let him step inside. The house smelled like fresh paint and the lavender candle I finally lit. Noah sat at my kitchen table and did his homework while I made grilled cheese, the simple kind my husband used to love. When I set the plate down, Noah looked up and smiled like the ground under him had stopped moving. After that, he stayed close. He biked over on weekends. He helped me plant herbs in old terracotta pots. He listened when I told him stories about his grandfather, small stories, the safe ones, the ones that taught kindness without preaching it. In return, he reminded me I wasn't invisible. Not to everyone. I joined a little community center by the water, the kind with folding chairs and bulletin boards full of handwritten flyers. I started volunteering twice a week, sorting donations, making tea, learning names. No one there needed me to be quiet. They simply needed me to show up, and I did. Some mornings I walked along the lakeside path in my gray scarf, watching the ducks and the slow boats. I felt my shoulders drop in a way they hadn't in years. I realized I had been bracing for impact inside my own home. Here, the only thing that startled me was a sudden gust of wind. I bought the little place with money I could prove was untouched, clean, mine. Sandra helped me separate what had been compromised from what had not. The closing day was ordinary: ink, keys, the click of a stamped document, but I cried in the car afterward, not from sadness. From relief. I had a door that only I could open. I changed my number. I updated my mailing address with every institution that mattered. I set my phone to block unknown calls after 8 p.m. The first time it rang late and went silent on its own, I felt a small thrill of safety, finally. Neighbors waved but didn't pry. Mrs. Patel next door brought over lemon bars and said, "If you ever need anything, knock." I thanked her and meant it. I had forgotten what casual kindness felt like, kindness without an agenda. Noah's mother, my daughter-in-law from Evan's first marriage, drove him over sometimes. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply squeezed my hand once in the driveway and said, "I'm glad you got out." That was enough. The investigation moved at its own pace, slow and official, but I stopped living as if my life had to wait for it. I kept a notebook, expenses, appointments, small goals, and I gave myself permission to be new at things again. On Sundays Noah and I walked to the pier with hot chocolate. He talked about school and friends, and when he finally asked, "Why do grown-ups do stuff like that?" I said, "Sometimes people want what they haven't earned. And sometimes they think quiet people won't fight back." He nodded, serious, and took a long sip. Little by little, I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped checking locks twice. I started sleeping through the night. The lake did not solve everything, but it reminded me that time still moved forward, and so could I. For a long time I believed silence meant weakness. That if I didn't argue or defend myself loudly, I must be losing. That belief kept me still while others moved around me, making decisions as if my life were already theirs. I know better now. Silence is not always surrender. Sometimes it is observation. Sometimes it is patience. And sometimes it is the space you need to understand exactly who is standing with you, and who is quietly taking advantage of your trust. They mistook my calm for confusion. My restraint for permission. They believed that because I loved my family, I would accept anything to keep peace. What they never understood was this: love does not require disappearing. I did not raise my voice. I did not seek revenge. I simply chose myself, carefully, quietly, and without apology. One document. One boundary. One clear decision at a time. I still light my lavender candle in the evenings. I still drink from the same blue mug. The woman I was did not vanish. She became steadier. More precise. If this story stirred something in you, know this: quiet people are not powerless. We are watching. And when we move with purpose. If this touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe to hear truths where silence becomes strength. I didn't lose myself that day by the pool. I finally claimed myself.